This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include Becki Gray from the John Locke Foundation, sitting in for John Hood, who's on vacation this week, political consultant Brad Crone, political consultant Doug Raymond, and NC Policy Watch's Chris Fitzsimon, and you're not a political consultant in there anywhere. Well, welcome to this week's edition. It was another hot week and another week without a state budget. But there was plenty of hot news, including another high-level resignation from Governor Pat McCrory's cabinet, a big capital improvements plan by the House that included a $2 billion bond package, and the release of campaign finance reports showing who raised how much money in the first 6 months of the year. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. In a town not known for keeping secrets, that sounds like one of those movie trailers. In a town not known for keeping secrets. The announcement of DHHS Secretary Aldona Vos's resignation took most everybody by surprise this week. In making the announcement, Vos said it was simply time to go home. But the rumor mill started cranking up about another sudden high-level departure from the McCrory administration just 24 hours after the department had reported $137 million in cash on hand at the end of the state's fiscal year with Medicaid. Chris, we've heard rumors of all kinds that a Medicaid reform deal was struck and it included Vos's resignation, or that she stepped down so as to prevent Medicaid from being taken away from DHHS, or even that the governor needed her to go out and raise money for his re-election campaign. What's your intel so far as what went on there?
Well, it's hard to know at this point. I've heard all those same rumors. There are a few things that you can't dispute. One is I think it's a little unusual for the head of a major state department to resign right as the General Assembly is deciding what the fate of her department, the fate of Medicaid that she oversees, the budget of that department. It's not a secret, and we've talked about it on the show. Members of the state Senate were never fans of Secretary Vos, and they had heated exchanges. And of course, we've also talked on the show. Her department was plagued with a lot of poor management decisions the first year or two. So clearly, this was not you said it was a surprise. The timing was a surprise, but I think a lot of folks in Raleigh thought this was going to happen a long time ago.
Well, they've been saying it for a year.
Well, I think it would have if Governor McCrory hadn't been so loyal, and I think loyal to a fault.
But Becki, what about this business about $137 million in cash on hand in Medicaid? Does this indicate to you that Medicaid solved its management problems and cash problems? What's the story here?
I don't think all of the problems have been solved, certainly, but I think this is an indication that they're moving in the right direction. I think there's some management decisions that have been made that are shoring up that. This is the second year that they've ended the fiscal year with cash on hand. I think that's clearly better than ending the year with owing a bunch of money, which is what, we've seen for, I don't know how, for many, many years. So clearly it's moving in the right direction. Are all the problem solved? No, of course not. And Aldona Vos, when she took over, it was really a mess. Now, as Chris mentioned, there were some questionable management decisions. Has she done everything perfectly? Of course not. But I think that she has left that department in much better shape than it was when she took it over.
Taking Medicaid out of DHHS, though, Brad?
No, really, that's still on the table. But I think I agree with what Becki's saying to a certain extent. The $137 million surplus, Tom, really deflates the argument that they need widespread reform. That Nelson Dollar and the House leadership have really done a good job over the last 3 years of managing the Medicaid budget and taking a situation where you had deficit numbers from cost overruns and then paybacks to the federal government, and they have managed that in a very efficient and effective manner.
But Doug, the Senate took a very unusual step this week in that Medicaid had been part of the budget plan that they had put forward, and so Senator Berger announced this week they were taking Medicaid out of the budget and it was going to stand alone so far as negotiation. Is that holding up the budget negotiations now?
No, I think that was an overture to say, listen, we want to get moving forward. We know this is the big piece. We're not going to hold it hostage here. Let's talk about it, vote up or down. But I can't help to point out the obvious here. I'll get some phone calls on this, but boy, what a difference a week makes in the resignation of a department head. I mean, we had Order of the Longleaf Pine and tears, and one thing that we were all scratching our heads a week ago was Tata was gone, the office was cleaned out. Obviously, Ms. Voss is going to stay a little while, and there's a natural transition, you see. It's still, I hate to backtrack, but it makes you wonder what happened last
So
week.
the governor he obviously knew this was coming because he immediately named a new secretary to take Voss's place, Rick Bajer, the former CEO of a biotech company. This is the biggest single agency in state government, a $13 billion Medicaid program.
The biggest test he'll face is going to be the Medicaid debate. And here's what's still on the table: the MCO fight versus the docs and the hospitals and the providers on ACOs and the CCNC model.
So did he pick the right person here? I mean,
that's the big question.
I think we need a business person here. I mean, we'll see whether this individual is the best choice. And certainly, I mean, this is a challenge. This is a huge challenge. Almost 20% of our budget, billions of dollars sitting there, big decisions. A lot of people's health is depending on this too. I mean, this is an important position, but I think we need a business person rather than a medical person.
But does it need to be a business person that has some experience in healthcare or dealing with the legislature?
I think both of those things, ideally. I also think it's interesting, this is the sixth cabinet person that has changed in 2.5 years. Now, I know there's some turnover. Usually that happens after a term, but I think at some point you start wondering why so many people...
I mean, no. The statistics show about 3 years is when they
Patrick
start
Gannon did a column on the Insider
that's
this week saying that this was an unusually high number for this.
It's not that. I mean, it easily kept them a long time, but there were some reasons for that. But listen, I've been as critical. I think I'm pretty even-handed about that. I don't think there's anything real unusual about the amount of turnover. I do think the way it's happened the last couple of weeks.
Here's the difference. I mean, let's call a diamond, a club a club. I think we all know that McCrory shows up for work and very rarely showed up for work. Wow. So,
and you also have different personalities with this administration. Yeah, very different. People who really have sacrificed, who have come out of the private sector. So it's a different personality mix here.
But think about the tough job that she faced too.
In the Democratic administration too, Becki. I think they sacrificed both ways.
I would not disagree with that, Chris.
All right. Well, we thank you for watching NC Spin on the air on YouTube. There's a reminder that there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage that you can't see anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel and other guests, and our weekly column. So get more balanced debate for the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. When we come back after these messages, a $4 billion House infrastructure plan.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Clean transportation options can help you fuel what matters.
We're fueling what matters to us by converting our fleet of collection trucks over to compressed natural gas. It's a good, smart business decision, and having the air cleaner is something that benefits all the families that work with us.
We use biodiesel in our heavy equipment. We've got propane in a lot of our police cars, and we've really embraced the electric car. Join the city of Raleigh and fuel what matters.
To learn how you can fuel what matters, visit fuelwhatmatters.org.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
We now return to NC Spin.
Governor McCrory has been traveling the state promoting his Connect NC program to build roads and public infrastructure, but it hadn't gotten much traction with our General Assembly until this past week. The House brought out a plan that increased capital expenditures from the $2.8 billion McCrory wanted to $4.1 billion. It's different from the McCrory plan in that it only includes $400 million in road bonds, but it does factor in spending another $1.3 billion on roads in a 6-year pay-as-you-go program. The majority of the bond funds would be spent $900 million on university campuses. We'd get $300 million for community colleges, $500 million for local schools, particularly in rural areas, and $75 million for local water and sewer projects. Becki, it seems the House has something in this plan for everybody, and everybody can like. The big question is, how's the Senate going to like it?
I don't think the Senate's going to like it any more than they liked the governor's bond proposal. And Tom, what the Senate position has been, they think it is a better use of fiscal responsibility to pay as you go. So they believe that stopping the transfer of the highway funds out of the general fund back to put that money into highway uses, which is what you're supposed to do with it.
$250 million
right,
a year.
They think, let's do that, use that money to start chipping away at these projects that have been designated as the high priority rather than taking out the bond. They're very skeptical of that. So I don't think they're going to be any more on board than they are the House.
There's got to be some political strategy in here. Why now? Why did the House come out with such a big proposal, and why now? And I mean, what's going on
Well,
here?
interesting. First of all, the House budget does what Becki says. It also it has $400 million of highway bonds, but it does also stop the transfers. That's where that $1.2 billion.
Well, the Senate budget did also.
Right, I know, but I'm saying so they sort of combine. I think the Senate will like part of that. I think the question will be the size of the bond as to why they're doing it. I think we're seeing now the last 2, 3, 4, hopefully, weeks of the session, all these things have to happen. McCrory's been going around the state asking for this. I think it was a little bit rushed, but it is interesting that we're talking finally about investing money in public use, public service, public programs.
After we've neglected it for so long.
Well, and after we've made a lot of budget cuts.
It's really good politics, and it's good public policy, too. It's really an interesting initiative. It's the best public policy initiative the governor has advanced on the infrastructure because, Tom, if you put $1 billion of general contracts and road contracts out for bid next March, you're going to generate 25,000 jobs.
And Tom, a couple things on this, too. You mentioned how is the Senate going to take it? There was over 20 Republican members of the House that didn't take it so well, and we know that the Senate's more conservative than the House generally on things like this, so that's going to be the other. The other thing is we keep talking about this as if it's legislation. This is a bond that goes to the voters.
Right.
I've been wrong before, but I'm not sure the voters are going to pass this.
Well,
and when
I
it
wonder,
doesn't, that becomes the benchmark of, okay, you put this forward. Now, how do we fund it, despite what the voters say? So I think they need to be a little bit more conservative.
Well, the polls have showed the voters are in favor of these bonds.
Absolutely. I've done a bunch of polls, done a bunch of bond referendums in 23 years of doing this business. And the Renew NC poll that was done by pollster for the Republicans, it was the highest number of bond referendum that I've ever seen.
Chris, did you find it interesting that here's a legislature that in general has not been particularly friendly to our university, and yet the House is going to give them $900 million for new buildings?
Well, and the governor gave them a significant amount of money, but the House increased it. I think that actually the priorities in the House budget are more toward education. I think the school construction around the state is a huge need. The community colleges is a huge need. I actually think they improved all the governor's package, even though I wish they would have been more deliberate about
it. Becki, the thing I found kind of interesting about this is it on the House Finance Committee when they were talking about this, they stood up and said, interest rates are at historic lows and there is a chance that they're going to be increasing shortly, and besides, nobody believes that construction costs are going to go anything but up. Hello? This is a message that we've been saying, the governor's been saying for years. Why is it all of a sudden taking hold?
Well, I don't really know the answer to that, except that we are at historically low interest rates. There are tremendous needs. These are not long neglected needs. These are assets that the state owns that need these improvements, these maintenance, these upgrades done. This is a good time to do it. There's a question of, it really comes down to...
Can they get this thing on the ballot by November, Brad?
They've got to hurry.
Yeah, they really do have to hurry. I think the deadline's drop dead date's probably the end of August. I think the State Board of Elections would really like to have it August 15th.
What's important about November? Is it because we're not having legislative elections in 2016?
Well, and just that, in general, an off-year election, you're going going to have a better chance of passing something that you know is going to cost you more money.
Right. There's also a concern to go ahead and get this done while the interest rates are
I think
low. There's a concern of interest rates going up.
I got about 20 seconds left, so I want a very short answer. What's your bottom line prediction as to what's going to happen with this infrastructure bond program?
I think the bond gets on the ballot and it'll pass in November, probably $1.5 billion.
Yeah, much smaller than this, but it'll pass.
I think it'll get on the ballot closer to the Senate version, and I still have my doubts.
Which is what? The Senate doesn't have a version for a bond plan.
What the Senate proposes will have a lot more to do with it, but I'm still not convinced it's going to pass in this economy. I
think they'll get it on the ballot. I think they're going to vet and edit some of these things. I don't think it'll be nearly as large as it is. I think they will get it in November because they'll be able to advertise those low interest rates at that time.
And will it pass?
I think it will pass. I think that the voters of North Carolina will assume that debt for these upgrades and maintenance kind of things, these long neglected needs, recognizing that state assets need to be protected.
It's going to have to be sold.
Absolutely.
No question about it. They're going to have, you're going to have to make your case.
And the governor's been all over the state selling at least the idea of bonds.
You have to admit he's worked it hard.
He's working hard.
Okay. After these messages, we're going to talk about election campaign finance reports.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
Campaign finance reports for the first half of the year are trickling in, and the big newsmaker concerns the race for governor, where Attorney General Roy Cooper, expected to run for the Democrats, outraised sitting Governor Pat McCrory. Cooper raised $2.2 million, while McCrory raised $1.3 in the first 6 months. I want to ask Brad and Doug, each of our political consultants, y'all manage political campaigns. Aside from bragging rights, just how significant is it that Cooper outraised McCrory, and does it tell us anything about 2016? Doug, I'll start with you.
Well, rarely do my candidates raise a lot of money, so I may be the wrong one to ask that. But listen, it's significant. I'm not going to spin this and say, oh, this isn't a big deal. But there are some factors here, and I think one of the big ones is this: if you're a person who tends to support Democrat candidates, you got one race that you're focused on in the state of North Carolina. Right now, as we sit here, there's nobody even talking about running against Senator Burr. So all your focus has been on Cooper's campaign. A lot of the money came from lawyers, which obviously between his background as Attorney General and just being an attorney, that's a great base. The next report's going to be the big one. I mean, I think we might give the governor a pass on this and say, well, there's some factors. But if it's a similar number the next time, watch out.
What do you think, Brad?
I think it's a marathon. It's not a 6-month race, 18-month race, more perspective from a campaign finance side. I don't think McCrory spent a lot of time the first 6 months of the year fundraising, simply because he had 170 other priorities down on Jones Street that he had to take care of. He is out fundraising right now. He had a fundraiser Wednesday night. He was in Burlington, Thursday night, and I heard he had probably a very productive month of July. So I think it's going to be a very competitive race.
Chris, we want to talk about some of the council of state races and some of the other election campaign finance reports. Did you find it interesting that June Atkinson hadn't raised any money? I mean, the rumors have been circulating all over town that she's not going to run for re-election as superintendent of public instruction. Does this confirm that?
No, it didn't. It certainly fuels them. I don't think it confirms it. I think it's too early in a council of state race. I may be wrong about that, but I think she's clearly is not out there raising money, or we would have seen it. I think the next campaign, just like the next report, just like Doug said about McCrory, will be the telling one. I don't think she's decided.
Attorney General Roy Cooper, if he does run for governor, then it opens up the AG post, and Wake County Democrat Senator Josh Stein is pretty confident the seat's going to be open. He's raised $350,000 in the first 6 months, and people are supposing he's going to be the Democratic candidate. Republican Buck Newton from Wilson, who you work for, is already declared to run for the Republicans. Becki, how is this thing looking up? Newton obviously got in much later to the race.
And the campaign reports reflect that. I think Josh Stein has raised, I forget, considerably more than Buck Newton has at this point. But Buck Newton really has only been in the race for about a month. So I think to Brad's point, it's really too early to tell. I think that's going to be an extremely competitive race. That race for Attorney General. Yeah.
Oh, you think?
Oh, the district attorney in Forsyth County, Jim O'Neill's getting into the race. He will be the dark horse. And I tell you, the law enforcement community, the sheriffs and the DAs are going to support him.
Is that on the Democrat side?
On the Republican side.
On the Republican side.
Republican district attorney in Forsyth County.
I'm going to argue with you. And obviously, full disclosure, you already said I handle Newton, but I'm going to argue with you, and I'll even make you a little bet on a stake on whether they support him or not. Both good men, but back to the
medium rare.
The fundraising part of it. One of the things about it is, Newton said all along that he was still deciding. That's really basically a month of fundraising, and it was a good number. And once again, the next report will be the big one.
Were y'all surprised that both Speaker Moore and Senate President Pro Tem Berger raised so much money in the first 6 months of this year? What does it say to you?
It says a lot of people like what they're doing.
Do you think so?
A lot of people want influence and try to encourage them to do certain things.
Well, and what about raising money while the legislature's in session? Because for most of that 6 months, the legislature's been in session. I didn't think they were supposed to be able to do that.
They're individual contributions.
Yeah, they can. It's not PAC money. I think the surprising number in a positive way is more. I think we know what Senator Berger is. We know the influence he carries. But more in the transition, we were hearing a lot of things. We're going to wait and see. His actual number was actually record-breaking for that position in that quarter.
You
so
guys
that's a
are
big
advising
number.
candidates. Is it wise for them to tell them right now, go out and get your money right now, because beginning after the first of the year, the presidential primaries crank up and they're going to suck the money out of North Carolina?
I mean, and get it while it's hot, and get it while you have a captive audience. And listen, the Democrats have done the same thing when we were in power. It's a pot calling the kettle black, but everybody's raising money, and guess what? Money's going to go to the leadership.
I want to circle back to your question about Speaker Moore and President of the Senate Phil Berger. I think what this tells us is the influence of the General Assembly, and in this whole spectrum of the governor's influence, what's going on at the General Assembly. I think this really speaks to the power that they have and the influence that they have, and people want to be a part of that.
Well, we're going to be talking about this all throughout the campaign. 2016 is going to be an interesting election year. After these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out, add your input, and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower cost, higher quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
We now return to NC Spin.
All right, we're down to my favorite part of the show when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. I have no idea what they're going to talk about, and it's always interesting. Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
I was fascinated. We talked about the House bond package, and I was fascinated before the 2010 election. One of the most commonly run ads against Democrats who were then in the majority was they spent $2 million on a polar bear exhibit at the state zoo. Why in the world are we spending money on a state zoo? The House bond package spends $24 million on, guess what? A new exhibit at the state zoo.
Polar bears?
No, but it's the Australasia exhibit and a new African pavilion. The same people who are blasting people for spending taxpayer dollars on the state zoo just spent 12 times as much, or want to spend 12 times as much.
You know what the number one animal in that exhibit's going to be?
Polar bear?
No, ostrich.
Ostrich.
And there you have it.
Doug, tell us something we don't know.
We've talked a little bit about campaign finance. I know I've been watching the show in recent weeks, and a lot of talk about campaign finance. Reports are being looked at like never before, and there's a lot of head scratchers in there that are people saying, is this legal? Is this a gray area? I'm predicting in the next session, and you're going to start to hear about at the end of this, major campaign finance reforms, and one of the big one is going to be no longer being able to serve as your own treasurer at the state level. It leads to problems.
Interesting. Brad, tell us something we don't know.
Well, Tom,
other than the
we were
ostrich
talking about the
business.
campaign contributions for each individual campaign for Roy Cooper and McCrory. The battle going on behind the scenes, too, is the RGA and the DGA. And both campaigns are telling high-dollar donors, while you're giving to Roy Cooper and you're giving to McCrory, make sure you write a check to the Democratic Governors Association. For the Republicans, make sure you write a check to the RGA. So both of the independent expenditure apparatuses are loading up cash, too, getting ready for the gubernatorial campaign.
And there are no limits on campaign
that.
Campaign contributions to RGA and like with the parties.
Correct.
All right, Becki, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, really under the radar screen is something that has to do with figuring enrollment formula for the universities and the community colleges. What we've seen in the past is those enrollment numbers have been based on just how many kids are attending, and then the money is handed out based on that. We're seeing a change, and other states are doing this too, where part of that enrollment number or part of that enrollment formula is based on performance measures and accountability. Things like how many kids are graduating, how many degrees are being issued to the students, how long does it take the students to get through the programs. So it's something that is just getting started. It's actually in law in North Carolina at the community college level. It is a policy at the university level, but something that we're looking at. It's occurring all over the country. Different results are coming in, but it's an interesting new phenomenon on accountability at the community college and university level.
The Pew Research Foundation did a piece on this, and we're going to do a topic in a future show. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, read our weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when we have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.